My family built their empire on my signature, then laughed at me over champagne. They didn't know that in less than a week, I would turn their black cards into plastic scrap and sell their $1 million sanctuary to strangers. They called me a failure. I called it a foreclosure. My name is Chloe Bennett. I am 29 years old. And on New Year's Eve, my own mother invited me to dinner just so she could tear me apart. The venue was Quintessence, a rooftop restaurant overlooking the San Francisco Bay. It was the kind of place where the air smelled like expensive perfume and old money. Everyone was dressed in black tie, crystal champagne glasses sparkled on every table. For a moment, foolishly, I really thought that maybe this year would be different. Maybe, finally, I belonged at the table. My mother, Meredith, looked flawless in her silk dress. My father, Richard, was charming the waiter, and my brother, Chase, was scrolling through his phone, looking bored. Then, halfway through the appetizers, my mother leaned in close to my ear. She smiled warmly, the kind of smile you give someone when you are sharing a delightful secret. But then she whispered almost sweetly, "We only invited you out of pity." I froze. "Don't stay too long, okay? You are ruining the aesthetic," she added. For a second, I actually thought I had misheard her. I stared at her, waiting for the punchline, until I saw that amused little smirk curling on her face. She was enjoying it. My brother Chase saw my expression and burst out laughing. He took a sip of his wine and said, loud enough for the neighboring tables to hear, "I told you, Mom. Chloe is basically the failure of the family, the one who never made it, the one we always have to rescue and hide." A couple of relatives at the end of the table chuckled. Someone muttered that at least I had shown up on time for once. It was as if they had all agreed beforehand that I was the joke of the night. I just sat there holding my glass, feeling every word land like a physical punch to the gut. And then something inside of me went very, very still. I did not argue. I did not cry. I did not ask why they kept using me as a prop to make themselves feel superior. I simply smiled, took a slow sip of my drink, set the glass down gently on the white tablecloth, and told them I had an early morning. No drama, no scene. I stood up, turned my back on their confused faces, and walked out of that restaurant alone, stepping into the cold, rainy San Francisco night with their laughter still echoing behind me. They thought I was walking away because I was weak. They had no idea that night I had finally hit my limit. They had no idea that 1 week later, the luxurious family cabin at Lake Tahoe, the one they loved so much, would be gone. The bank accounts they depended on would be closed, and those lovely bank statements would start rolling in, revealing a truth they were not ready to face. That night I went home to my little apartment in the Mission District, dropped my keys on the counter, and just stood there for a minute, listening to the silence. My hands were still shaking when I opened my laptop and started pulling up everything I had ever signed for my family. I pulled out a worn plastic box I kept in the back of my closet, filled with paper copies of documents I never really understood, but had signed anyway because they said it was for the family. That night, for the first time in my life, I finally read them. The cabin at Lake Tahoe, the place they loved to brag about to their wealthy friends, was not just in my name for tax reasons, like they had told me for years. It was in my name, period, my signature, my ownership. I dug deeper. The family emergency credit line Chase had opened years ago after one of his tech deals went bad just happened to list me as a co-applicant. The joint bank account my mother swore was just for helping me build credit had been used to pay for their first-class vacations, their hotel upgrades, their perfect life. Page after page, it became painfully clear. I was not the helpless failure they painted me as at dinner. I was the financial safety net they had quietly wrapped around themselves. At some point around 3 a.m., I grabbed a pen and a blank notebook. I wrote 3 words at the top of a fresh page. Take it back. Underneath, I started a list. Number 1, the Lake Tahoe cabin. Number 2, every joint account with my name on it. Number 3, every loan or bill I had been tied to without a real choice. I thought about my old college friend Zoe, who was now a shark of a lawyer in Silicon Valley. They had invited me to dinner just to humiliate me. Instead, they were about to feel what it was like to live with the consequences of their own signatures. The morning after the dinner, the humiliation had turned into something colder and sharper. I called Zoe. We hadn't spoken in a few months, but she picked up immediately. When I told her about the dinner and how my name ended up on every failed business loan my brother took out, she went from concerned friend to litigator in about 2 seconds. I brought everything to her office in Palo Alto. Zoe picked up the deed to the Lake Tahoe cabin. My parents had always claimed my name was on it because my grandparents wanted it to feel like it was mine too. Zoe adjusted her glasses and cursed under her breath. "Chloe," she said, "this isn't a sentimental gesture. This isn't for tax reasons. This deed says you are the owner, sole proprietor." She pulled up my credit report. It read like a highlight reel of my family's extravagant life. Flights to Paris, 5-star hotel stays in Aspen, all tied back to my Social Security number. Zoe leaned back and said, "If they want to play big finance games, they should have used their own signatures, not yours." She told me about a cash buyer she knew, a couple from the tech world looking for a property in Tahoe who could move fast. She told me if I signed, the cabin would be gone. It was the nuclear option. I hesitated. I thought about the summers I spent at that cabin with my grandparents, the only people who ever made me feel like I wasn't a disappointment. Selling it felt like slicing away the only soft memory I had left. I told her I needed to go there one last time. The drive to Lake Tahoe took 3 hours. The cabin sat nestled among the tall pine trees, a trophy home my parents loved to show off. I went into the small study at the back of the house, my grandfather's room. I knelt down and pulled up a loose floorboard under the heavy rug to find a rusted metal box we had buried when I was 12. Inside was a sealed envelope from my grandfather. I tore it open. The letter read, "My dearest Chloe, if you are reading this, it means you have finally started asking questions. We are leaving this house to you, not your father, for a reason. Your parents love the idea of wealth more than they understand the responsibility of it. This house is your parachute. When the time comes, do not be afraid to pull the cord." I read it 3 times, tears streaming down my face. For years, my parents told me they were managing the property because I was too incompetent to handle it. They had lied. My grandparents knew. The guilt evaporated, replaced by resolve. I called Zoe. "Do it," I said. "Sell it." Zoe didn't waste time. The tech couple made an offer 20% over asking price. I met them at Zoe's office the next morning. My hand shook a little when I picked up the pen, hearing my mother's voice screaming about betrayal in my head. But then I remembered the letter. "It is your parachute." I signed my name. The illusion of the Bennett family empire began to crumble. 2 days after I signed the papers, the Bennett illusion was scheduled to make its biggest appearance of the year at the Silverleaf Charity Gala in San Francisco. I knew Chase was planning to make a large donation to impress investors. I sat in my apartment staring at the online dashboard for the family credit card. I called the bank. When the representative pulled up the file, she paused and said, "I see here you are the primary account holder, Miss Bennett." I blinked. I had always been told I was just an authorized user. No one mentioned that it was technically my account. With my parents and Chase writing on it, I wasn't building credit, I was carrying their debt. "I want to close the card," I said, "completely. The representative warned me that authorized users would be declined if they attempted further transactions." I looked at the clock. The gala was in full swing. "Yes," I said, "I am sure." It didn't take long. First, my phone started to buzz. Then it started going insane. My mother left a hysterical voicemail screaming that the card was declined in front of everyone. Then came the text from Chase. "You tanked my credit score. You sabotaged everything. A client just walked away because the payment bounced." I leaned back and laughed. He was furious because the magic trick had failed. I moved to the next item on the list, freezing the emergency line of credit and stripping my name from every utility bill. 2 days later, Chase showed up at my apartment, pounding on the door. He looked disheveled and panicked. He yelled that I had nuked them, that Dad was furious, and Mom hadn't stopped crying. "It isn't fraud, Chase," I told him. "It is my name. I just took it back." He shot back that I was ruining his career over a joke. I looked him in the eye and said, "It wasn't a joke when you called me a failure, and these weren't just signatures. They were my life." That's when he played their trump card. He told me Dad was talking to lawyers to prove I was unstable and made these decisions while mentally compromised. Then he dropped the bomb. Mom had collapsed. She was in the hospital with heart palpitations, and if she died, it was on me. I called Zoe immediately. "They are fighting dirty," I said. Zoe replied, "Then we stop being polite. We are going to the hospital." I arrived at the hospital expecting a tragedy, but when I found my mother's room, the door was ajar. She wasn't hooked up to life support. She was sitting up, looking remarkably healthy, yelling at a nurse about the TV channels. I heard her say, "I need my phone. I have to check the comments on my post. People need to know I am the victim here." The guilt vanished instantly. It was a trap, a distraction. While I was here feeling guilty, my father and brother were not at her bedside. I realized with a jolt, they were going to the cabin. I drove to Lake Tahoe in a blizzard. When I pulled into the driveway, my father's Bentley was blocking the entrance. They had changed the locks. I pounded on the door, yelling that this was my property. My father, Richard, opened the window like a general in a fortress. "Go home, Chloe," he said. "We are filing an emergency injunction. We are going to prove that you are unfit to manage family assets." Chase appeared behind him, looking smug, claiming they were protecting me. Just then another car approached. It was Marcus Thorne, the family's longtime attorney. Richard smiled, thinking Marcus was there to help him. But Marcus walked toward me. He looked at Richard and said, "There is no injunction. I am here to advise you to vacate the premises immediately." Richard was stunned. Marcus continued, "The law says this property belongs solely to Chloe Bennett. The paperwork you sent me to fix the estate plan was fraudulent. If you do not leave now, the sheriff will arrest you for trespassing." I watched my father's face crumble from a successful businessman into a terrified old man. 10 minutes later, he walked out. He didn't apologize. He just said, "You have made a serious mistake. You cannot just opt out of family." "I already did," I replied. "You opted me out when you decided I was just an insurance policy instead of a daughter." I stood alone in the driveway as their taillights faded into the storm. I walked inside the empty cabin and locked the door. For the first time, the silence felt like ownership. The funny thing about consequences is that they do not always arrive like a cinematic explosion. Sometimes they creep in through awkward conversations and revised paperwork. A week later, Marcus Thorne called to tell me the estate plan had been updated and the lines of credit annotated to make it clear who they belonged to. If my parents ever tried to drag me into a financial mess again, they would have to drag their own lawyer down with them. When the money from the cabin sale hit my account, I didn't go on a shopping spree. I paid off my debts, set aside taxes, and signed a lease on a bright studio space in the Arts District. The first time I stepped into a room that was mine, not ours, not the family's, I felt something uncoil in my chest. Back on my parents' side of town, Chase had to downsize to a smaller townhouse. My mother's Instagram bragging softened into something more careful. A few weeks later, she asked to meet. We sat in a coffee shop in Noe Valley. She looked smaller without her mansion. Then she apologized. Not a fake apology, but a real one. She admitted that calling it pity was really about control. I told her I appreciated the apology, but words didn't reset the score. "The version of me who signed whatever you put in front of her is gone," I said. "If you want a relationship, it has to be on terms that do not require me to shrink." She nodded. My father never said I'm sorry, but he stopped trying to convince me I was crazy. "We aren't a warm family now, but we have something we never had before: boundaries. Here's the thing I wish someone had told me years ago. Family can be a source of love, but being related doesn't give them unlimited rights to your signature. Being a good daughter doesn't mean you owe them your credit score. Sometimes, the most loving thing you can do for yourself is to read the fine print, ask the uncomfortable questions, and say no when everyone expects you to say yes. You are not a safety net, and you are not a punchline. My name is Chloe Bennett, and for the first time in my life, that name belongs only to me.